UNCA Marketing Promotion students, I'd like to introduce Sarah Benoit, the co-founder and lead instructor of JB Media Institute, and I will let her tell the rest of her story.
Awesome, thank you so much, Paul. So welcome everybody, I'm really excited to be here. I want to start by just kind of downloading a couple housekeeping things before we begin. I know we've got a certain amount of time tonight. I'm like a freight train, so I'm just going to sort of deliver a lot of information. If you need to stretch, get up, move around, being aware of the camera, please feel free to do that. You won't interrupt me at all. I also want to invite all of you to have a conversation with me tonight and ask questions. So we're going to be talking a lot about basic marketing principles, which I know a lot of you have actually covered, but we're going to focus, I think, more specifically on how they're being implemented in a variety of marketing departments. And from businesses small and large, kind of how are they actually taking a lot of the core principles and things that we understand work, but then putting them into that sort of huge list of different tools and strategies and opportunities that we have online. So as we're talking about that stuff, I really just want everybody to feel comfortable. We don't have to be too formal. If you've got questions, just jump in the conversation or throw your hand up or whatever you feel comfortable doing. And let's sort of talk about the application of these things, because the reason I sort of titled this today, Marketing in the Modern World, is because one of the biggest difficulties that we have in this field is literally that it's moving at a pace that is almost impossible to keep up with. So even though there's basic principles that we apply across the board that we learn, essentially once you're actually in a job, it is just like completely crazy. And businesses are trying to grow, there's lots of different moving parts going on, there's lots of decisions to make, there's lots of things that you have to kind of experiment and test with and learn from and then redo again. And so I feel like when you're learning marketing, when you get into the job field, as soon as you arrive, you just, in the first few weeks, are like, I'm stressed out. And I think that's something a lot of people are confronting. And so when I started this year, I actually launched an ebook and I called it Everyone Knows Marketing Sucks. And basically it was around this idea that if we don't sort of change our mindset about the application of marketing principles and communications principles, if we don't really sort of adjust kind of our minds and the way that we receive information and put out information and really kind of merge it with where we are actually living, that we're always going to struggle. So a lot of marketing departments and a lot of marketing people just feel like they're struggling. They're not getting the results. Things are confusing. I always say it feels like they're chasing the marketing. So most of the students that work with me are current marketing professionals in their job looking for support. And they're like, I'm exhausted. I'm just chasing this all day. And I never feel like I'm ahead of it. I always feel like I'm behind it. And I try to tell them that's not because you're not good at your job, and it's not even because you're not skilled at marketing and communications. It's because the modern world is crazy. And people are consuming information at this high rate. And so we are trying to navigate that for the first time. In my career, literally what I do for a living is not even recognizably the same job. Right, so when I started out, I originally started out in corporate healthcare, doing a little bit of marketing and mostly customer service when I got my first corporate job. Before that, I was a really awesome bartender. And essentially, once I got into the field, I kind of realized that the corporate life and maybe even the healthcare industry were a little bit sort of just kind of boring for me. I needed to do something that was a little bit more kind of forward facing. And so when I got laid off my job, I decided to go ahead and start a company in 2003. And what I did was I started a search engine optimization company, which at the time was really interesting because I knew a lot of programmers and computer people, and they were like, yes, we need more communicators in this space. We need more people that can write and do photography and do graphic design, like in the space, building better websites. But then every time I went to meetings, people were like, nobody's gonna pay you to help them with Google. Google's just free. They're never going to pay you for that. Within 2 years, though, we had a completely viable company, and everybody was buying that. So it was really exciting to go from this very traditional background and shoot myself into something completely non-traditional. And I basically learned everything online. I am historically known for being up in the middle of the night with my phone and both of my laptops and my iPad, doing various different things simultaneously. And I've also just been able to, since then, really build up not only one company, but the second company. So essentially, my first company is an SEO consulting firm. We do still build websites. I have one employee on that side who's worked with me for a long time. And then about 8 years ago, I started working with a competitor of mine. And essentially, he needed help building a marketing agency. So my competitor became my biggest client. And I helped him build his agency for 4 years, ran a lot of his projects, trained his staff, and then we opened a school called the JB Media Institute. And really, a lot of that desire to create the school came out of this need that I saw for people who are working in marketing to really figure out how we do it in 2020 in a way that makes you feel awesome about your job all the time. It makes you want to go to work and gives you the creative freedom that you really want to have. Because I think in the past, marketing was very formulaic when we were doing kind of more traditional marketing 30 or 40 years ago, right? And now there's really no formulas. It's like some people are doing great on Facebook, some people are losing. Some people are doing great on Twitter, some are losing. Some have a great blog, some have a blog that nobody ever looks at. Some people do email marketing and get lots of sales. Some people send emails and it's like crickets chirping and there's nobody there. So it's literally this, it's hard to take any sort of formula and say this is what's gonna work for everybody. It's more figuring out those base principles of marketing that we know are true, and then, like I said, figuring out how we're gonna apply them in the modern world. The one thing I do love about this work is that I think it keeps you young. So I can never know if I'm for sure right about anything. I can never know if my strategy 100% is gonna work. I'm never really sure, even when I'm teaching a class, if what I'm saying about, let's say, Google algorithms or the Facebook and Instagram social media advertising platform, I'm never sure if what those things were yesterday are still true today. So I have to almost always keep learning. I have to always keep asking myself questions. And so I can't get comfortable. I can't get kind of comfortable and complacent about my job, because if I do, I will definitely be missing something. So I feel like it is an exciting, awesome place to be for a career. And it's taken me at this point pretty much all over the country to meet different people. I put this picture of myself, this one right here, me and the gentleman shaking hands. That is one of my most all-time favorite people in the search engine optimization field, named Rand Fishkin. And I started watching him online when he first started out in 2005. And a couple of years ago, I went to Raleigh and spoke at a conference, and he was the keynote, so we actually got to meet. And it was so awesome to meet somebody that basically, when I was getting laid off from my job and then starting my first business, I was like watching all his videos at night, and I was learning everything I could from him. And so to have that chance to thank him for doing that was so awesome. But I think it's just amazing all the different opportunities that you have in this field, because there's a place for so much talent. I know marketing people that are writers. I know marketing people that are photographers, videographers. I know people that are in marketing that did journalism in college. It's really across the board. If you are a communicator and you really care about people and you're interested in connecting with people, then there's going to be a place in the field for you to do some amazing things. So I want to start, like I said, by just talking about some baseline principles that I think are shifting overall in just how we talk about things. And really it's around branding and marketing and the relationship between those things. And branding and marketing, I think obviously you all know what those are, but I think we're really shifting, again, sort of our mindset about them. And we have been for like a decade, but now everybody really has to shift because of the nature of the market. And so really the brand of any business or organization is centered around the purpose and the values of what that business or organization is doing, right? So the brand is something so much more than what it used to be. It used to be colors and the visuals and kind of these things that guided kind of the way that you did your print materials or the way that you did your website. But the truth is now branding is really the feeling underneath all of that. The brand has to have this core thing that then actually comes through all the stuff that you do. And so there's a great blog out there for this company called Tronvig Group. And years ago, I was reading this blog, and I just loved the quote that he gave about defining branding and marketing, kind of understanding their relationship. But he says, branding should precede and underlie every marketing effort. Branding is not push, but pull. Branding is the expression of the essential truth or value of an organization, product, or service. It is communication of characteristics, values, and attributes that clarify what the brand is and what it is not. Marketing may contribute to the brand, but the brand is bigger than any particular marketing effort. The brand is what remains after the marketing has swept the room. So in a world where marketing can be done in so many different ways, brand is more important now than ever. Because if the experience that somebody has walking through the door to your store, and the experience they have going to your website, and the experience they have talking to you on the phone, and the experience they have when they get your email newsletter is not consistently speaking for the brand in a way that makes sense to them, you will lose them, right? They won't understand what you're about, and it won't stick in their mind because they got like 8,000 marketing messages today. So the only things that are going to stick are the things that are really clear and consistent, and the things that actually really get them excited. So this is where branding is just taking this deeper level. And because I specialize in content marketing, I literally have to deep dive with almost every client or student that I have about this topic. Because I'll say, well, talk to me about the brand. And they're like, well, here's my logo, and here's my colors, and here's the fonts that I like. And I'm like, okay, cool, but now let's talk about the actual brand and what it is you're doing in the world. Because there's like 1 million companies on the internet. There's billions of people on the internet. Why would anybody pay attention to what you're doing or saying, right? We have to go deeper than just sort of the look and the feel, and really think about things that are really the core values, and also just the core stories that you are trying to tell to people, because that's really what's going to relate to them in the world of the digital sort of internet and in digital marketing in general. And then the other door that you open on the internet is that the brand is what you say and what you consistently present, but then you're inviting the entire world in on it, right? So social media really opened this door wide. And that is when you give things to the public, you are now at their mercy of what they're going to say and do with it. So again, as a company, you have to be really solid about where you're at when you start to put out messaging and create different things. It doesn't mean it has to be perfect and expensive, right? But it does mean that it has to be intentional and well thought out. So I work with a lot of small businesses, and we DIY lots of kind of stuff for marketing, but the truth is we're really clear about what we're about. And if we can be really clear about what we're about, we don't have to be perfect. Right? So it's really shifting, I think, our approach to things to consider the brand this like deeper piece. And if you are going into marketing, like you're walking into a company and you're working in their department, or you're even a freelancer, or you have a company like me and you're working with clients, the truth is they need you to help them with this. Because business owners, even executives of corporations, like they're not sitting around thinking about this all day. So they need us to kind of step in when we're in that position of leadership and say, hey, we need to talk about the brand and get clearer about it. We need to know what we're trying to say in the world. We also see these changes coming up in basically the whole industry because we're moving from demographics to psychographic conversations, right? So demographics are really explaining who the people that your customers are, you know, who they are, their age, their gender, their location, things like that. But the psychographics are really this new exploration over the last decade or two into why people do certain things. Right? Not just who they are, like who buys food at Ingles or who goes to Starbucks every day, right? But that person, why do they go to Starbucks every day when they could go somewhere else? Why do they go to Ingles when they could go somewhere else? So we're really starting to try to ask that deeper question, right, in all of our communications and in all of our marketing so that we can understand people's motivations. Because we live in a world where we can do anything we want at any time. So I can buy stuff all day long on like 5 devices in my house and like literally get anything. I can be like, bring me my groceries, somebody come walk my dog, pick me up and take me somewhere. like go pick me up a pizza and bring it back. Like I literally at my fingertips just have all these options. So in a world where we all have every option and we can choose from all sorts of different places to satisfy our needs, a lot of times that why is a really important question to be asking. Because especially if you're a new company and you're going to step into a marketplace, why would anybody choose you if there's other people already doing what you're doing? How are you going to convince them that there is a reason to choose you or try you or give you a chance, right? So you have to start asking those questions and dig a little bit deeper. And then a lot of companies you'll hear are talking about company culture. And I think this is, again, related to this shift where we're really thinking about, from a marketing perspective, these sort of deeper questions about the purpose and the values and how we really connect to people on that level. Because again, we are probably not their only option as a brand. There's going to be other brands that can provide them with similar products and services. So if we want them to choose us, we have to give them a sort of values-based reason. Company culture has become, again, a huge conversation. As an entrepreneur, I've had this conversation more in the last 5 years than I probably ever did before. And it's really around, one of the selling points of my business can be that I do business differently than other people. So my business partner owns a marketing agency. They're B Corp certified, right? B Corp means we're a corporation, but we do business in a different way. And we hold ourselves to different standards around sustainability and fair pay and things like that. And we actually have to prove it to get certified. And it's a really long, lengthy process. But if we do that and we get B Corp certified, we're making a value statement about our culture. And my business partner's marketing agency was able to attract a lot more companies with that same designation as clients, because they actually have a values commitment to hire as many other companies as they can that they think are trying to change this part of the business world, right? So that's just sort of one good example of how the way that you build your company now internally can even have an impact on whether or not people would choose you and become a customer. Right? So there's lots of different companies out there that I think are good examples of this, where they're really focusing on how they give back to the community, or they're really focusing on their sustainability, or they're focusing on some values-based piece to attract people. And sometimes it's not always something altruistic. Sometimes you'll have a brand where you just suddenly see that they talk a lot about how much they love NASCAR. And they attract a lot of people who also love NASCAR, right? That is a total values-based way of communicating to them. And so internal and external marketing, I think, have become sort of the same thing. We used to think of like how you deal with your employees as this more kind of internal way of marketing. And then marketing out to your customers was a different thing. I now think they're much more integrated and related. And so if you're treating your employees badly, as we all know, that can show up and really hurt you in the marketing world. So I think we all know companies where that has come up into the news, right? That they have employees with different lawsuits or complaints or things like that. And so that can drive people away, because I guarantee you there is another option for them probably, regardless of what you do. And they might look at that company's values instead. So again, I think these are just things that we can see are massively changing. The other thing that I think has been part of my career and part of the conversation for a long time is there's kind of this old school way of thinking about being professional where you separate out personal and professional, right? I always tease that over the course of my career, in the corporate world especially, there was a lot of don't mix business with pleasure, right? Don't mix personal and professional stuff. When you go to work, you're in work mode. When you leave work, you're yourself. And that is going away. I think overall for most of us, none of us really would prefer, I think, to have a job where we couldn't relax and be who we really are. But mixed with that is that we've also opened up in just sort of that front-facing way when we're interfacing with customers to really think about how we can make a deeper emotional connection there as well. So we want to feel emotionally more at peace and able to be ourselves in the workplace. And the truth is the consumers actually want to have that experience too. They want more authenticity. They want more transparency, right? So they want to know up front what the prices for things are. They don't want to have to dig and dig and dig. They want to be able to sort of understand, again, that your values are shared with them, or there's some part of the business or the brand or organization that resonates with stuff that they care about. Again, because they can give their money to anybody, right? I can literally give my money to so many different places. So how am I going to make that decision if there's all these different companies that offer the same products and services, and they're all about equal and quality, outside of maybe shopping just for price? The only other way I really shop anymore is through that emotional piece. And that feeling is what's really driving the action. So that's when we see marketing convert to sales, right? When marketing becomes an actual sale, that's because an action took place. Either a lead was generated, or a product was purchased, or somebody was hired. And I think to get to that point, we have to sort of really focus in on how we connect in with people. And this is basically just neuroscience at the end of the day. And that's also a big part of marketing now. We talk a lot more about behavioral psychology and neuroscience and things like that. Again, because we're trying to dig for that why. We're trying to understand the motivations that people have. So if you want the thing that you represent, whether it's a brand, a product, or service, if you want to be memorable and shareable, or sometimes what we call sticky, if you want people to be thinking about your product later, thinking about your company name, then they have to feel something. If they don't, it's neutral.
I was gonna say, is there any like specific feeling that like gets the best reaction? I think in my mind, I like think of the ASPCA commercial and the cute little kittens in the snow and all those things. I mean, does one do it better than the others?
There isn't really one feeling that does it better than the others. What's interesting though is that different emotions cause different types of brain reactions, right? So one study that I've read a whole bunch of times and shared with students that I find super interesting is, so they did an interesting study on people when they get sort of mugged or robbed and it's a negative experience, that their memory imprints very specific things. And so like they realize that when somebody gets held at gunpoint, they can't remember the person's face, but they can describe the whole gun in detail. And it's because their brain had a bunch of negative feelings and then hyper-focused on the scariest part of the situation. So you'll end up with a person who's like, I don't know what it looks like, but like, I can perfectly draw this gun for you that was pointed at me. And so the negative emotion actually causes more specificity in your memory, whereas positive emotion will cause your memory to be more like fuzzy and general. And so like if I go to a party and I have a great time, but I have a friend later who's like, oh, I cried through that whole party. And I'm like, really? Because I don't remember that. And it's like, yeah, because I was like, woo! I was in my own bliss. And so like I wasn't picking up on all of those details, literally from a neuro perspective, right? Like my brain just doesn't receive those details at the same level. So we do see things like that. But there's really no one feeling that's better than others. And I actually find that fun because I feel like when I started in marketing, you weren't ever supposed to say anything negative or controversial. It was like, no, only rainbows and poofy clouds and sunshine. Like we don't talk about anything else. The internet's pretty much killed that. So like now we really understand that actually sometimes negative emotion is really good at driving action. So locally, I always use Brother Wolf, to your point about organizations that work with animals. Brother Wolf, I think, does a really interesting job of sometimes putting out content that's like horrible. It's like the saddest thing I've ever seen. It's the worst. I'm just like, why? We should just get rid of humans and like cats and dogs run the world. I'm so done, right? They will send me some like real harsh truths. And the truth is though, I end up clicking to donate, right? And that's because I feel like I have to do something. So that negative emotion still drives me to do what they want me to do. And I think they do a great job of balancing it. Right? Like they sort of spend a certain portion of the time giving you that feel good, look at this animal that's so happy and found its home and blah, blah, blah. And then every once in a while, they kind of tap you with this more realism kind of, if you don't do it, nobody will do it. These animals are suffering, who's going to step it up right now? And so I just think that the whole internet and the way that we all have to sort of accept having a lot of information about what's going on and be a little bit more realistic to a certain extent, that allowed us actually to have more fun in the marketing world. And I always use the example of Cards Against Humanity, right? So a company that historically has done a huge amount of negative marketing, Like, I mean, does like Black Friday sales that are meant to like really deeply offend people, you know, does like all these kind of things to basically say humanity is a pile of garbage. And that company continuously makes money. They really know their audience. Those messages attract their audience and make them laugh and make them want to buy more of the add-on packs, right, that they're adding to the card game. And so I think they're just a great example of a brand that literally like started with this sort of very negative connotation and has like fully stuck to it and has actually been pretty successful doing that. But they really did try to tap into a specific type of person, you know, that would kind of have that existential sense of humor and want to participate. But as those people brought it into society, now almost everybody's ever heard of it, even if they hate the game. They've probably heard of it at this point, right? So I think we have more freedom now to kind of play around with the emotional components of the story, and we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. But I think a lot of this just comes down to, like I said, if you want to be memorable in a sea of things. I mean, I've read a bunch of studies where we know that in the United States, people on average get 8,000 to 10,000 marketing messages a day. Like, that's where we're at. And that doesn't even count all the stuff we wanted to look at, right? So like the bunch of stuff we wanted to look at, and then on top of that, we had this whole flow of marketing.
I'm sorry, I asked this last week, but how many of those are like repeat messages of like the 8,000 to 10,000? I mean, they all can't obviously be new, so I mean, you know.
I mean, I've never seen anybody sort of like outline exactly which portion of that is repetitive, because I think it would be so different across channels. So they're looking more at like impressions of things and adding it up from there, I would assume. But I definitely think, you know, it just depends on which part of the market we're looking at. Because things like social media, if I'm buying advertising, the algorithms inside of, let's say, Facebook and Instagram's ad manager is very specifically cautious not to overshow to the same person, because they know that's a sure way to like just basically irritate you. So like if Facebook shows you the same kind of ad or an ad from the same company multiple times and you don't engage, it is going to go away pretty quickly, because they're like, if you don't engage with it at a certain point, we're going to show you something else to see if you'll engage with that. Right? So I think if you're in the social media world, and even in the email marketing world, and a little bit in Google Ads, like all of those sort of algorithmic technologies where we know artificial intelligence is running a lot of that stuff, you know, that is actually smart enough to be very thoughtful about how frequently somebody sees a repetitive message. So when we look at the same day, I don't actually think people see many repetitive messages in one single day. But over the course of weeks and months, obviously, they should see a lot of repetitive messages, because that's usually how it works, right? A number of touch points eventually leads to something. So like I said, the neuroscientific part of this, there's two things that I've taken away over the years from just studying a lot of people and reading a lot of different things that I think are really key when you're working in the marketing field. And that is that, one, emotion affects decision making. So again, when we're talking about somebody clicking subscribe or buying a product or buying a ticket or doing whatever it is that you want them to do online, they didn't do it unless they had a feeling about it. If it was neutral, they just forgot about it and they moved on to the next thing. So they've really already proven in science that essentially the human brain, when I make decisions to take an action, I'm essentially going to use both the cognitive and the emotional part of my brain simultaneously. I don't ever make the decision just cognitively. So no matter how logical we all want to believe we are, it's all lies and not true. We don't really make any decisions without that emotional component. And the more complex our decisions get, the more emotional we get about it. So if I have to choose between like a whole bunch of things and it's a lot of information, I'm not actually going to get more cognitive. I'm going to get more emotional to make the decision. And I think that's why we see values drive customers, right? Because now I have so many options. A lot of times I'm leaning on that emotional part of my brain to help me make a decision about what to do. And when I do that, I'm essentially leaning into things that have more to do with the feeling I have. And I don't know about you all, but I'm sort of that way about a lot of different things that I purchase. It's like I've gotten it down to like 2 or 3 companies, but the truth is, like, this company's pictures just worked for me. You know, or like when I picked my mortgage broker, I had 3 mortgage brokers. I knew they were really cool. The one girl had shorty bangs. Yep, she was my mortgage broker, right? I mean, that was a completely ridiculous way to make the decision at the end. But when she sent me her first email and her hair looked like mine, I was like, that's it. right? And I just moved on because I'd already researched everybody. I couldn't crunch any more like data pieces to make the decision. So I went with my own gut. So I think we see that a lot more. Also, whenever you have feelings, things end up in your memory more deeply. So that's just like a basic part of brain science. If I have a feeling about something, then it literally deeply encodes in my memory in a different way. When I'm neutral about things, I just forget about it. So if your marketing is getting in front of people and it's too generic and it's too bland and it's not speaking to them, it's not going to have the impact you want. And it's because they're just going to forget it. They're just going to scroll right by it on their phone. It's just not going to be something that stands out. So sometimes we have to get really creative about how we're going to, try to really tell the stories in a way that kind of trigger those feelings to come into play. And that sort of goes back to all feelings, in my opinion, are good feelings. It's really, though, some brands are controversial and some are not. So if I'm a lawyer, I'm probably not very controversial. I'm in a regulated industry. I have to be very thoughtful about what I say. I'm not going to be a risk taker if I'm in the legal field. But if I'm a web designer or I'm a dog walker or I'm, running a hotel, I have a lot more freedom, right? To kind of play with the emotions of things and figure out how I'm going to get people to think about us later after they saw our video or saw one of our images or visited our website or something like that. So a lot of how we're doing this in marketing, and I'm sure, again, all view this as like basic stuff in the sense that storytelling is a huge part of marketing. That's like a huge conversation, I think, in every corner of the industry at this point. But I really think the next sort of level of what we're focusing on is how the stories evoke a feeling. So how do we actually figure out to connect with people in a way that makes a difference and causes them to feel sort of that stirring of their gut, like, oh, I relate to this, or oh, that makes me ask another question, or this made me feel uncomfortable. Sometimes that's how you draw people in, right? Is giving them a way to somehow just feel connected to what they're looking at. There's a few keys that I focus on for really trying to, again, help clients and students come up with the stories that we're going to use. So the stories become like the foundation of a lot of the messaging. And the stories are really created through our understanding of the audiences. Because if we can understand the audience and their problems and their wants and their needs, all the different things that they're trying to satisfy by looking for things online, then we're able to sort of better tell a story that's going to connect in with that and potentially answer their question or solve their problem or make them feel like somebody is kind of alongside of them in the process of whatever they're doing. So I always kind of start with what audiences are we going after and what message are we really trying to send. So this is where I often tell students they're stepping into the campaigns. Right? I'm like, now we're moving from overview of the marketing to saying, all right, now we need to get this audience to do this thing. And we need to campaign to make that happen. Right? So you might have already clarified all the audiences that the company has overall, but then how do we go into action? The way we go into action is by focusing in on something that we actually want to create in the world, right? Which is contact these people and make this result the end result. And so I always call this developing the campaign mindset. But again, when you work in marketing, this is something that feels pretty normal and natural. And then when you're working alongside a business owner or somebody else in the company that's not really focused on marketing, a lot of times they struggle with this piece. Because I'm like, well, we're going to do this awesome campaign to get these people to do this thing. And they'll be like, but what about all the other people? I'm like, we're going to campaign to them later. We're never going to stop campaigning. We're going to keep doing it over and over. But we do have to kind of focus in on what we want to accomplish and set some goals. If I'm working with a bigger company and we have a whole marketing department, awesome. We could be running 5 campaigns at the same time. If I'm working with a smaller company and it's basically, one person who's kind of the business owner and one other person whose job is basically everything else, right? So they're not just the marketing person, but they're also doing every other job like HR and cleaning the office and other things they might be doing. Essentially, we have to figure out how we can still execute a campaign and get a result. And so we might just do one campaign and focus on that for 3 months or 6 months, right? So that we can get that to where we need it to be and then roll out a secondary sort of phase 2, phase 3, and keep going forward. Seventh thing is drawing from real experiences. So again, that sort of age where companies kind of told this like movie style fictitious story about how things were. I think we've really moved away from this. I might be slightly biased because I'm in the entrepreneurial world, and I think as a business owner, we've definitely moved far, far away from the idea that we should sort of orchestrate the story and make it into something that it's not. That we should just tell the story for what it really is and then let people decide for themselves whether or not they connect in. And I think a lot of the drive for content, so no matter what kind of marketing you're in, whether it's working on websites or doing, like I said, writing or video or photography, the truth is what you're gonna find out is that there's this constant demand for content and messaging. And so it's sort of this never-ending to-do list. You get to the end of your week, but you're never really done the to-do list. It's just gonna be there on Monday over and over and over every week. And so you've got this sort of endless stream of stuff that you're trying to create in order to make these connections. So a lot of times that can feel cumbersome. You can start to lose your ideas, especially if you have the same job for like 2 years or 4 years or 6 years. I've worked with clients where 3 or 4 years in, it's like, I've been doing the same thing every day for like 4 years. I've been posting on Facebook for like 3 years. You know, I start to feel like I'm sick of it. Like I'm bored with this, right? We need to like refresh kind of the energy here. And so that's where I think being in the moment becomes a really important piece of actual marketing itself. So sometimes just observing what's going on in the business, you know, again, asking different people for their take on what's happening. I'm a big fan, even though I work with marketing departments, I work a lot in tourism, and I'm always like, can I talk to your customer service person? And they're like, yeah, why? And I'm like, because they actually talk to the customers. I mean, you're awesome at your job, but you're like in an office doing marketing, which is super great. But like, we don't actually know what's going on downstairs in the lobby. Like, we don't actually know what happened this morning. Those people sitting at the front desk have a lot to contribute for content ideas, because they're literally speaking to people on a regular basis. So I'm a big fan of incorporating more of those people. I got the chance to work with Harrah's Casino, and that was one of the biggest sort of recommendations I had for them, because most of their marketing department is in an office, you know, 6 or 8 people, and they are not on the floor. They are not actually interacting with anybody. And so when they wanted to really expand their social media, I was like, we have to figure a way to incorporate those folks. And so it was awesome. They went and got their own really fancy GoPro. They got a bunch of cool gear for their whole team to use. And it wasn't just for the marketing team. It was for all these other people who are going to be interacting with the customers throughout the day to also contribute. Even their restaurants, having sort of their restaurant people be able to take pictures of the food and contribute that stuff throughout the day. Because a lot of times the marketing people that were sitting upstairs, they were missing out on all of that as an option. And so they were like, social media is terrible, we hate this, we can't come up with ideas. And I'm like, the entire casino is downstairs. Like, it's an endless fount of ideas. I could be sitting here doing boomerangs of your machines for like 2 hours and make a ton of content just on that, and people would probably enjoy it, right? Because of the visuals and because of how cool it is. So figuring out how you actually get in the moment and tell the real story of what's happening. This is also something I think companies have a block to around putting their own staff like into things. And again, this is where internal and external marketing is merging, because I'm like, we have to tell the story of the people who work here. And any company that doesn't want to tell the story of the people that work for them, I question what they're doing to those people. Because if they were pretty happy most of the time and your staff was retained and you had the same people for a long time, why wouldn't you want to celebrate them in some way, right? And be in the moment with them and share that story. So that's, again, relates to company culture and some of the other things that we see shifting. Also in marketing, for a long time, we had this perception of, you know, we just have to push out the message, sell, sell, sell. And I think you're going to find, no matter where you are in the market now, that's had to slow down, because most people don't like it, right? So my mentor at Western, he always says there's no market for ads. And I'm like, there's not. Nobody got up this morning and was like, I cannot wait to see a Facebook ad. I cannot wait to see an Instagram ad. I've been waiting all day for it. Nobody says that. So all advertising in some ways is a form of interruptive media, which people didn't quite ask you for. You targeted them with it. So, hopefully if you did good targeting, you ended up targeting people who need what you're offering. But the truth is you're still interrupting their experience to a certain extent. So a lot of times what we do in marketing now is we really think about breaking up the content so it's not always this just pitch, this like sales pitch over and over and over, that we actually mix in other things that are values-based, other things that are funny, right? Other things that we think will entertain our potential customers. And a lot of times it's funny, my students will be like, well, when I post this, I don't really feel like I'm working. I'm just like surfing around social media, like sharing pictures of cats. And I'm like, I know it doesn't feel like work, but it is. It's strategic work. We got to connect with people. We have to get them to feel like your brand is the same as them, relates to them, has something important that they should pay attention to. The way we do that is by making a real connection with them. And we can't make a real connection if all we're doing is selling and talking to them like a transaction, right? So we also have to create content and messaging, whether it's advertising or organic, and say, hey, we're here because we believe in this, because we love this picture of the sunset, because we've got a dog in our office. We did this as a team together because we believe in this value or this principle. Part of the content has to speak to those things. And again, even in advertising now, we're incorporating more of this because we know people don't tend, if somebody's never heard of your company or organization before, they're not going to give you money the first time they see you, typically, right? There's usually a series of touch points that over time, they eventually buy from you or donate to you. In order to have those touch points and get them to potentially engage with you multiple times so that they have a chance to become a customer, it can't just be buy my thing, buy my thing, buy my thing. It's like once you've said that twice, they're like, yeah, I know. I get it. You want my money. So does everybody else, right? And so they'll turn off to the messaging instead. So that's why, again, we're looking at like storylines and how we can sort of tell a story in a campaign, whether it's organic or paid, and really engage people on a bunch of different levels. So by the time they get to the end of that experience, they're like, I love this company. Right? Or I really like this campaign. I totally related to it. That's what we're trying to do. So getting other people involved, having partners, thought leaders, influencers, even getting your own customers into the mix is really, really valuable, I think, to think about. So I'm often thinking, especially in social media and with websites and with email marketing, how do we partner up with other people? How do we shine the spotlight as a company onto something else amazing? Right? To sort of show you what it is that we really care about and to show you that we care about the same things if you're a potential customer. I also think these days we make it a little bit too complicated. If you want to write long form, if you want to do really complex things in marketing, you can. There's all sorts of different software and all sorts of amazing things you can do to reach out to hundreds of thousands or millions of people if you want. But there's also a lot to be said about the simplicity of things like Instagram and how straightforward a lot of the stuff is on that system, that you don't have to spend a huge amount of time making an Instagram story. You can do it pretty quickly, and it can still have a huge amount of impact. And so I like us just always to think that we've got both opportunities. There may be opportunities to be more complex and deeper and more long form, but there's so many ways now on the web that we can just really quickly get a point across. And everybody's attention span is like 3 seconds long. And so like really a portion of the content has to be that hook just to get me to even pay attention to you at all. And then once you've got me hooked in something, I'm more likely to watch a longer video. I'm more likely to click over, read something on your website. But that initial piece that grabs me might be pretty simple and straightforward. I also think, like I said, people tend to say to me sometimes, I don't have anything else to say. I can't keep creating more marketing because I don't have anything else to say. And I'm like, you do. We all have something else to say, guaranteed, right? I think sometimes we're just judging whether or not it's interesting enough, or we're judging whether or not it's going to be too sort of mundane or like not exciting. I think people are often surprised to find out that the more that we share some of those details and even just the day-to-day, how hard we're working, the different ways that we're stretching ourselves, that might not seem like news or excitement to you, but it could be making a potential real connection with another person who's struggling in the same way or asking the same question. And so I'm really asking a lot of people these days to sort of open up and think about, like, don't judge the story before we even talk about it. You know, like, before you get in the meeting with me and we start brainstorming, don't already decide that these 3 things are off the table. Let's just come in here, no judgment, and throw out all ideas on the table. When I worked for Harrah's, we did a lot of social media with them, tracking and looking at what was working. And in one winter, over the course of a few months, one of the best posts that happened on their Facebook page was of 2 guys that shovel their snow in the morning in the driveway at like 5 a.m. with their shovels and with the plow. And it was literally something the staff just took, of the 2 of them with their shovels, like, ah, it's like still dark, right? They got this huge flood of comments into that post, literally of people from like South Carolina and Georgia. They were all like, we're driving up there right now. Thank you guys so much. We can't wait to be there, right? And so it got all this excitement. And literally the whole marketing team, we were all sitting together, we're like, we can't believe it's 2 guys with the snow shovels. Like, that's what does it. Like, we spend all this time making all this content. But one of the biggest thing over the course of 3 months is this one thing that just shows that there's actually real people that work really hard at Harrah's to give you a good experience. And the people who go to Harrah's really appreciate it, right? And so they really tapped into getting their own audience to respond to something and to show a lot of gratitude to the staff, which I think actually put some goodwill just into the whole scene, right? For the staff members to feel like they got so much attention. And then, like I said, going back to this idea of a formula, I feel like everyone I work with pretty much wants like an answer. They're like, how do I do this thing? How do I get to the top of Google? How do I get 10,000 people on Instagram? How do they get really focused on this, like, I have this result I want, just tell me how to get there. And like I said, the problem is not everybody got there the same way, so there's no answer to the question. And I think that creates a world where, again, people want this sort of finite way of looking at things, but when you're actually working in the marketing field, it's not finite. Like, you have to go with the trends, you have to go with the opportunities, you have to listen a lot, which we're going to talk about in a little more detail. And you have to just really think about how you're going to evolve things forward. As a company, as a brand, with your values, especially if you're with a business from when they're smaller to as they grow. So I've been helping out my business partner from the time his company had 4 people to now, when it probably has about 12 or 13, so we're 3 times the size. They've had to really evolve the company messaging, the way that they kind of present themselves, to incorporate that shift. And so I think we all have to start, like I said, having this kind of mindset of it's okay that things are organic and growing. It's like planting the flowers in your yard, right? They start small and they become something else. And you sometimes water them more and sometimes water them less. Like, we have to have that kind of flexibility in the field because we're going to be learning while we go. We're going to be learning from the people that we're actually trying to connect with as we go along and then adapting to whatever happens. And so we can't just be like, this is the story and the story never changes, because that's actually not even like, that's not truly human, right? So as human beings, we are not one static story, right? We evolve over time, and businesses are run by people. So businesses are doing the same thing. So I think when we become sort of the leader of the communications and the marketing and the messaging, we have to be willing to sort of adapt and want to grow with it. And sometimes, you know, the best thing you can do is have people around you that you trust. So I always have a core group of business owners and marketing folks where when I'm not sure about something, I'm going to get their opinion about it right away. Be like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Have you tried this before? Have you tried that before? And I'm sort of encircling myself with people that are also going through the same process so that we can kind of bounce things off of each other. So Jonas Sachs, one of my favorite authors, good marketers see consumers as complete human beings with all of the dimensions real people have. So one of my biggest complaints about my field being a lot in technology is that we call everybody users. I'm like, there's no other time in our language where that is a good thing to say. Like, literally, if I look at anybody in this room outside of technology and I'm like, you're a user, nobody's like, oh, thank you. That was a great thing. It has a terrible connotation, yet in technology, that's how we refer to all the humans. I'm like, why don't we just call them people? I'm like, let's just refer to them all as people, because that's actually what they are. And they're complex just as we are. And so as marketers, we have to always keep that in mind. So a few other things I think are really important that don't get talked about enough. Mobile devices, I'm sure, again, all of you have this feeling because you're using your smartphone on a regular basis like most of us. But mobile devices rule like the world. More people have them than computers. It's the main way people access the internet. This is something I struggle with a lot of business owners that are my clients because they've been in business for a while and they just think their natural assumption is that people are looking at a screen like this. And I'm like, they're not. They're looking at this all the time. And even if they eventually end up here, there's a good chance they went here first. So we really need to start focusing, I think, all of our marketing efforts on the experience being these smaller screens and understanding kind of how that impacts things, especially in web design. This is a huge conversation because right now, a lot of times people build a website and it's responsive, right? So it's gonna change depending on the screen size, but they still built it from this perspective first. And so then when you go and look at it on a mobile phone, the website's not quite right. It's like the calls to action or the clickable buttons are way down low. There's like things that don't quite fit right in the screen. And like that should all already be taken care of. Like any designer who's kept up with things knows that you need to be testing that stuff out from the beginning. And so mobile first has become a big sort of approach that we take. Now, I do think there's some considerations in two ways about mobile first. One is if your audience is older. So we can't assume that people who are, let's say, 50 and over potentially still have a desktop at home, potentially have a laptop that they use. They might be using desktop more frequently than mobile. So if your prime market is all over 50, you might find the percentage of people coming to your website from an actual mobile device is smaller. There's still probably some, because I feel like almost every website gets traffic mobile from mobile devices. But you might see the ratio is different, right? The percentages are different. Also in the business to business world. So I'm a company that sells to other companies, right? So essentially, a lot of times when people are looking to hire me, they're sitting in their office in front of their computer. So a lot of people go to our website from their computer. That's very, very common. And I think in the business to business world, you're always gonna see that right now we still weigh a little bit over into the computer sort of desktop laptop side. But everyone is being impacted by the amount of people that use their smartphones. And most of the time people are accessing you from multiple devices, depending on what their needs were. And so it's really important that you kind of meet those design standards. There's lots of tools out there to kind of guide you on what the standards should be. Google is the harshest taskmaster. So they have a testing tool that I've been using for the last, it's been a while, like probably 7 or 8 years. I can't always meet everything that they say, depending on what the client asks me to do. Sometimes the designs that we get, they don't load fast enough. We have to make compromises in the way that we build. But most of the time, I'm gonna try to hit everything I can on Google. So an exception would be like, for me, a home page to do well on Google, it's gotta load the whole page in 3 seconds or less. That's the standard. If you're under that, Google's judging you. Big time, right? Now, if I'm building a website for a photographer and they're gonna have a photo gallery and I'm gonna put like 60 photos in there, I guarantee you my photo gallery page is loading at like 6 seconds or maybe 5.5. I'm not gonna worry too much about fixing that. Because to me, if we've getting them to click over to the gallery, we've got them already moving into the site, right? And they're clicking on a visual. Most people do have that understanding. Take a breath for a second. Because when we're loading like a lot of video or a lot of photo content, we're gonna see that it's a slightly slower load time. But I try to make those compromises really clearly, because again, if my home page is loading at 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 8 seconds, that's painful. You're losing a lot of traffic at that point. So it's interesting to use that Google tool and test websites. And Google's great because they'll give you a whole printout of everything they think is wrong. So they don't just judge you, but then they're like, here's a checklist that you can take to your designer or developer and figure out how to fix the problem.
Is there like a generic format they use? Is it like for like iPhones or just in general will it like apply to those things? I know my phone's really old and so I'll go to like, whatever, a newspaper or periodic or whatever and it'll be really, crunched together. Is there, I guess.
So if you put anything through the mobile friendly test, it's got a few different settings it'll do. So like it looks more at things like 3G versus 4G. and it'll tell you like the differential on that. It's funny, so Google Analytics is a tool that you can use to look at better all the different actual devices that are accessing your website and see what percentage of them are older phones. I know for me in the web design world, the rule of thumb is we don't ever design backwards, ever. So like we're always designing for the existing phones and the phones that are about to come out. If your phone is 3 years old, you just need a better phone. I can't go back and try to adjust the code to fix that problem, because a lot of times if I go backwards and I start adjusting code to fix the iPhone 6, now the iPhone 11 is all messed up. So it's like I end up having to say the sacrifice is people with older devices are technically probably going to suffer depending on what they're looking at. I actually find I mostly have problems with Chrome. Older Chrome is terrible. It's like I have a lot of websites where we put everything out and it looks so great, but it's like Chrome on the iPhone 6s looks terrible, you know? And so we'll do everything we can to try to modify it, but a lot of times we have to focus on the forward-facing stuff. But yeah, you'll notice in this tool and in a couple other tools, you can sort of adjust settings for things, but it's usually not the like device itself. Yeah. And then, is there anybody in here ever really studied Google or followed anything about Google? Awesome. So I'll just be real that Google is literally the most fascinating, amazing technology I've ever had the pleasure of studying in my life. I never, ever get sick of it. It's just incredible what they're doing. They also might truly be the advent of like the Terminator movies becoming real, and we might all die from evil artificial intelligence, because they're going really far with the AI and with a lot of the technology and the algorithms. But at the same time that I think, you know, they're doing some really, really amazingly innovative, slightly scary things, they have also decided to share a lot of what they learn from all this tracking data that they collect. So if you didn't know it, Google really tracks like every minutia of everything that we do. How many of you in here have Google on your phone? Like you use a Google app or Gmail or something? Yeah. So most people do it. It's funny, on mobile, they dominate at about 90%, depending on the study, between 90 and like 98% of the search traffic on mobile goes directly to them. On desktop, it's a little different because Yahoo and Bing still have a little bit of mojo on the computers. But Google, like one of the best things they've done in my mind to sort of, I think, make it okay for the rest of us that they're tracking so much of what we do, is they have this great website called Think with Google. And when you get the slides, I've put the link in there for you. You can sign up for this newsletter with them for free. And it's literally all these studies all year long that Google is doing based on all the behavior tracking. So they will do studies that are things like how African-American millennials use YouTube, you know, for, you know, these types of things, or you know how this age group does this particular thing around the holidays when they're shopping for products, right? And so it gives you all this really amazing market research that's basically free to just sort of understand better how we're actually using the web. Because a lot of times you'll think the way you're doing it is the way everybody is doing it, and then you'll find out actually I'm the 8% of people that do it my way. And 92% of the people do it this other way, which is amazing. I'm always fascinated to find out those things. One awesome thing that they came up with that I really liked 5 years ago or so was this idea that there's mobile moments now that they call micro moments. So when people are wandering around with their phones, they have these moments where they need stuff, and so they go to their phone for that help. And they call them the I want to know, I want to go, I want to do, and I want to buy moments. So we're using this kind of understanding of behavior to help us, again, design better websites and design better social media experiences, and really think about if we're going to produce things online, how do we produce things that will be useful to people when they're having these moments, when they're asking questions, when they're trying to get directions. So a good example would be if you are a brick and mortar business and you want more people to find you by searching, you need to have a Google My Business listing, and you need to manage that listing really well, and you need to rank higher in the Google local listings, right? Because when I'm on my phone and I start looking for stuff, those local listings will dominate it. So most of us have seen website directions, click to call, right? That's Google My Business. It's actually a tool that any company can use to manage and control that information. So when people want to go and get to my location, I need to make sure that I've claimed that tool, and it's what shows up at the top of Google for my brand name, so they can just click the directions and automatically GPS themselves to my bar or my salon or whatever it is. Right? So I've really loved that Google is trying to help us understand in a general sense how people are acting online, and then really help us take that knowledge and figure out how we can actually create content and other things that are going to be more valuable and useful. Any questions about this stuff or thoughts? Making sense? Awesome, sweet. So the last few things I want to talk about are, again, stuff that I think is pretty common, but we have to sort of start, I think, to shift our mindset about it, especially when we're actually in the field applying things, because there's so many different things going on. There's a lot of different touch points that we have to have with people before they actually do what we want them to do, right? So they might have to see our Facebook, go to our website, watch a video, sign up for our newsletter, and then actually make a purchase or hire us or contact us for some other reason. Those touch points, I think so far, as the internet has come online over the last 25 years, and we've gotten social media over the last 15 years to become sort of this more ubiquitous kind of universal thing, we're having to really start to think more about the flow. And as we have to think more about the flow of people and how they're doing things, it's funny, it also simultaneously became way more complicated. So the way people used to touch point with us through, let's say, print advertising and radio advertising and other types of things, now we've just got a much more complicated situation because there's so many different ways that they can do it. And so even just tracking it is like a big conundrum. Like data tracking, I think, in marketing is a huge conversation because, one, we still haven't figured out how to do it really right so that we can watch people cross over from channel to channel. We're just about to like push into that, I think, in the next coming 10 years, right? Is tracking systems that can cross-track devices. But simultaneously, while we have that happening, we also have the entire world in an uproar about whether or not people should be tracked in the first place, right? So, we were talking earlier before class about how now you've got Europe basically saying that we believe each individual person should own their data, not the corporations. Now California has basically decided that they want to embrace a law that backs that up. So now in the US, I sort of personally felt like the worst case scenario would be state by state, having them change things like that. Because right now it's already weird having GDPR, right, which is the laws that happen in Europe. Now when you collect emails, if you're collecting emails from people that are citizens of Europe, you have different laws for them than you do for people in the United States. And they don't even have to be in Europe living there. So my friend who lives in Hendersonville, who is still a Swedish citizen, she could essentially sue a company for breaking GDPR, even though she lives here, because she's still a Swedish citizen, and the laws over there protect everybody who's a citizen of the EU, right? So having that come into the States and thinking about how that would play out if we went state by state, for people who are national companies, that's very stressful. Because it would be hard to try to keep track of what the different sort of laws were around data collection if you had to organize everybody by state and make sure you did different things based on the laws there. So I think we're going to see in the US that we're going to end up having to move to a more standardized way of doing things. But as that kind of stuff happens, and as sort of just like the overall customer experience becomes more complicated, and there's way more channels and different ways for them to contact you, we're going to create this sort of interesting, just like tension, I think, overall in marketing communications that we're going to have to like figure out as a whole industry, and technology is going to be a big part of it. It's also really important to remember that a lot of times the audience, and I'm sure again you guys have covered this, is not one big ball of people. It's your audience is all these different niche segments of everything, right? Because right now, if you're working on digital marketing, the saying would be, if you're marketing to everyone, you're marketing to no one. Because again, if you're broad in general, It doesn't stick with anybody. It doesn't connect with them, so they just forget about it. So we have to really segment, we have to niche, we have to have messages that speak to our different sort of core pieces of our audience, not just one audience as a whole. So as we're kind of thinking about all these things, it's really forcing us, again, to like sort of go deeper and not just think about, oh, I got to sell this product at this price to as many people as possible. But we have to sell these products and services to these types of people for these purposes. And we have to figure out how to campaign across the board for all these different things, right? And again, the smaller the company, the less complicated it is. The bigger the company, to me, the more complicated it gets. And so customer journeys are something that I've spent a lot more time on in the last few years because, again, as tracking gets better, we're trying to start to map these in a stronger way, right? So the customer journey really is every interaction that a person is going to have with your company, your product, your service, whatever it is. And it's funny because the purchasing part is only one part. So even though that's the ultimate goal, is to get somebody to actually convert into a customer, the truth is their journey is the whole entire thing. And a lot of times once somebody makes a purchase, a lot of businesses will let it sort of fall off. They're like, yay, I got the money. And they move on to getting more people to give them money. And I'm like, the customer journey has continued. After they gave you money, they could give you money again. They could tell other people to give you money. Like, we can't let the customer journey just like drop off. Right? I work in a lot of events, and we see that in events all the time. I'm constantly telling people, I'm like, look, I know when we get done the event, we all want like a week off, and we all want to go faceplant and not care. But the most important time after the event that people are still excited about it is like the first 72 hours afterwards. Like if we want them to post their photos, if we want them to tag something, if we want them to engage with us on social media, that 3 days after the event is super ripe and awesome. If we sleep through it, 2 weeks later, they don't care. They've already been to other events. Our event is in the past. It's not going to matter as much. So we're really trying to map out that customer journey is this more holistic view. So I put in just a couple of awesome maps that I really think are interesting. This is one my mentor gave me years ago. That's just kind of this basic sort of, it's kind of like in the old days we had the sales funnel, right? So people would have lots of options and they'd whittle it down and then they'd make a choice. We sort of replaced that with what we call the customer journey map, right? Which is now, because I can go and ask people for their opinions, ask my friends what they think on Facebook, look at a bunch of different websites. I actually might start with less options, then expand my options, then refine my options, right? So we're moving in this more like circular kind of motion. And so this is kind of the very basic kind of premise of what a customer journey map is. But then when you have an existing business, it can become something this complex, right? Where we're pulling together all the different aspects of the marketing. We're looking at all the digital, all the print, all the things that are happening in the store, all the things that are happening on the phone, every possible contact that the person can have. And we're really trying to understand what are the ways that people can move through these different touch points. And how can we make sure that they're more streamlined, that we capture the right information at the right time? Are there holes in the experience for people where they drop off and we don't follow up? Because if we followed up, we might actually get more sales or more leads. And so actually I think one of my favorite ones I've ever seen of these is IKEA's, which was like crazy because they have so much going on. They're such a big company. But I saw their whole customer journey map, and it was really fascinating to see how they were trying to understand that relationship between being in store, being online, looking at their catalog printed out versus looking at things on the website and kind of bringing all that together. And I think this customer journey piece is causing web designers to talk a lot more about usability. So one thing I think is important to remember, especially if you end up with a marketing job, is that people who are web designers don't necessarily need to know anything about marketing. So I work with a lot of web designers where they are graphic designers and they are super talented, and that is their specialty. They don't know anything about Google. They don't know anything about social media. They just marketing was not the thing they focused on. And so when we work together, I have to help inform them about certain things. Otherwise, they build a website that doesn't really do what we need it to do, right? Sometimes I work with nonprofits and they already have a web designer. And I'm like, cool, could you tell them to put the donate button in the upper right of every page? You know, and then the designer will be like, yeah, but that'll mess up the header and the header won't be so beautiful. And I'm like, everybody needs the donate button in the upper right. It's a basic standard. We can't move away from it, right? It's sort of like in the nonprofit world, you also can't use another word besides donate. They've studied it and studied it. If you're like, support us, you get less clicks, right? So there's all these studies into website usability now. And of course, things like Google are putting out studies about overall usage of the internet. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, they're putting out studies about how people are using their platforms. All of that stuff is like changing on a regular basis. And so we really have to make this effort to make sure that whatever we're doing, our website is sort of our real property as a brand. It's the property we own. We can have a Facebook and a Twitter and all that, but we don't actually own those properties. Those properties are owned by social media. If I have a MailChimp, that's a great tool. That property is still owned by MailChimp. If I'm not paying MailChimp, I don't have that anymore, to a certain extent, right? So my website becomes the real thing that a brand owns. It becomes our actual real estate on the internet. And so I feel like a lot of times we don't put enough thought into how a lot of different companies' websites have not fully graduated up to where they need to be. And it's not because they don't look great, it's because they're not really usable. They're not producing the results and the click-throughs or the time spent on the site that we want. And a lot of that has to do with just understanding the usability and making that a priority. A side note to this is something called accessibility. Does anybody in here, does everybody know what website accessibility is? Or no? Cool. Yeah, it's the ADA compliancy. So that's another thing that's coming up in the marketing thing like right now because we've changed some laws. So the American Disabilities Act has historically required that all websites that are government-based or that basically benefit the public, so anything that's like a hospital, a large nonprofit, a university like UNCA, they have had to follow standards to make sure that their websites meet accessibility standards and requirements, right? Which means if I have to use a screen reader or another type of system to navigate the internet, that the website can be navigated without a problem. The issue is that all other companies, medium and small size businesses especially, we've never been required to follow those. And so a lot of us do not have ADA compliant websites. And they are now basically saying that if your website is not compliant and somebody with disabilities uses it and they can't do what they need to, they have every right to sue you for not making your website completely accessible to everyone. So that's like a whole new thing that's just been opening up over the last couple of years, which I think is fascinating. Also maybe as a web designer, slightly stressful because there'll be a whole bunch of things a bunch of us have to correct that our clients couldn't really pay for before. And so we're going to end up saying, you got to pay for it now. I'm trying to roll a lot of that into my redesigns. When I redesign for people to upgrade stuff, I'm like, hey, we should do an accessibility check, make sure everything makes sense. But this is going to become a bigger and bigger conversation, I think. And again, web designers, I think, are needing to really re-educate themselves about it and dig deeper into both usability and accessibility. In the past, we've always had website design and then UX, right, which is user experience. Like you can get a whole degree in it. I just don't think they should even be separated. I'm like, why are we building websites with no user experience focus? That doesn't make any sense anymore. In the old days, yes, because 10 years ago, people would still surf the web and kind of click around on things and take like 15 seconds to look at stuff. Now, we're all just like swiping and spending 2 seconds on everything. So it's like this focus has just become more and more important because of that behavior that we're all sort of generating. And then one of my big soapboxes, again, and I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the hotel example and the Harrah's example, but I really believe customer service is marketing. So I'm like a big soapbox person of like, I think these departments should be the same. I personally would advocate, I don't understand why customer service get paid so much less than marketing people, since typically they have to deal with all the crap, honestly. And like a lot of what they bring to the table is so valuable to the marketing people. I really would like to see more departments hybrid their marketing communications and their customer service. And especially if we look at something like social media, where on social media, the way the algorithms work, if you can't engage your own fans, nobody who hasn't heard of you will ever see you. So I want to reiterate that because it's a big myth that people do not understand. People often think, well, I posted, so everybody saw it. And I'm like, no, no, no. That's not how it works. There's no point in which you posted on any social media where everybody saw it in a feed. That's just like literally not even possible. But one of the biggest things that people miss out on is they're so focused on getting new people. They're like, well, we want new followers. We want new likes. We want new people to click to the website, that they aren't really thinking about the actual people that already liked the page, that already follow them. I'm like, you need to understand, especially on Facebook and Twitter, but also on things like Instagram, or especially on Facebook and Instagram, but also on things like Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest. Essentially, if the people who are already subscribed or following or liking you don't care about what you're saying, the algorithms are not going to show you to people that have never heard of you before. Right? So one of the core pieces to success in social media is we have to get the people that already like you and know you to engage. When they engage and they start commenting and they start sharing, what happens is we prove to the algorithm that the content is good enough and deserves to be seen by people who haven't heard of us before. Right? But essentially, to me, all of the algorithms are like, look, your own Instagram followers don't care that you're saying this, so like we're not showing it to other people because it's not proving itself, right? It's not, there's no behavior showing that this is worthwhile. So I think we have to spend a lot more time on our customer base. Like in 2020 especially, I'm like, you need to really massage the relationships you have with the people who already gave you money. They are literally like your ticket to more money. It's like, but if you can't get them excited, if they paid you and they don't care about you, it's going to be really hard in the digital world to make the case to any of the tools out there that you deserve to be seen by strangers, right? And your only way to get there is going to be paying for ads. And a lot of companies will just do that. They're like, fine, we'll just run ad campaigns, and that's the way we'll do it. And that's a completely viable option. But organically speaking, we have to start thinking of customer service as the core of what's going to actually make us successful. And so I think of Facebook as customer service. I think of Twitter and Instagram as customer service, not just marketing, not just communications, right? Because I feel like there's so many of our customers from before, so many people who've already connected with us are going to come back to those channels, hopefully. And so we need to give them a reason to come back. So again, Rand Fishkin, one of my favorite heroes. If you ever want to look him up, he's awesome. His Twitter is hysterical. He started a website called Moz.com, M-O-Z. It's the oldest SEO kind of tool and sort of educational website in the US. Still one of my favorites. I go there all the time to keep up with things. But he says measure your customer journey, not just your conversion path. So I think it's really, like I said, we have to move away from sales. And that only being like all we talk about in marketing, and we have to start thinking about that whole experience that we're giving people, because that experience is what's going to cause them to become a customer. That whole experience is going to help them make that decision. And so we really want to be focusing on that bigger picture. So when it comes to all of this stuff, one of the other things I really think is important in marketing is no matter what kind of job you get or what part of the marketing world you're working in, you cannot do it in a silo, right? So the sure like death of your creativity and the sure like pathway to hating your job when you're a marketer is just like being in an office by yourself, being totally responsible for all the ideas. It's just not fun. It's like really not fun. It's like the one person can't just generate all sorts of ideas all the time, and they can't just think about everybody all the time alone in a silo. This is why most business owners can't really do their own marketing very well, right? Because that silo gets really harsh. It's like there's too many things. Humans are too complicated. We have too many problems. It's like you can be really good at marketing, even for like me, 20 years. And the truth is it's easy to feel that burnout on a day when you're tired, you don't feel well, something went wrong that day, your cat's sick, whatever, you had a fight with your mom, whatever it is, that stuff is going to impact whether or not you're able to be on and creative and create a result. And so even if you work in like what I call the marketing department of one, I have a lot of students where they're the sole marketing person for the company. And so they're in a silo all the time and they feel really lonely. And that's part of why I created my school, so that they have people to interact with and ask questions to and brainstorm stuff with throughout their week. That stuff is just really, really important. And even if you're in a big marketing team with like 5 people or 10 people, making sure that you have these kind of exchanges that I think are pretty innovative and collaborative are just gonna make the entire job better. It's gonna make everything you do more effective. And it's overall just gonna it's gonna be a faster, quicker way to get to results. And I think this is, again, a mindset thing that we have to think about. So listening carefully, the greatest thing about the web is that we have a chance to constantly kind of pay attention to what people are saying and doing, and sometimes even asking them to give us their feedback. And so it's really, I think, important for us to think about how we can, as part of our marketing, keep going to people and saying, what do you care about? What worked for you or what didn't? Can we have your feedback about different things? We really appreciate the exchange. We really have to think about the reciprocity of the relationship. Again, so I know it's typical for all of us to think, in the old days, again, marketing was a little bit more of a megaphone. You just pointed it and shouted at people, right? So I made TV commercials and you had to sit and watch the commercials. I made radio commercials because in between the songs, you had to listen to the commercials. So there was a lot of marketing. It was very one-sided, and the internet just like really shifted that. And now we've had the internet for so long that I think everybody's just shifted their expectation. So consumers expect to have this like reciprocal relationship with brands. They expect you to answer questions. They expect you to answer the reviews. They expect you to respond to things. Radio silence is like the sure way to start worse dramas. So I've had a few clients where it's like somebody said something, they're like, I don't want to deal with it, I'm not answering. And then like literally an hour later, the person's like, you're not even answering, you suck. And I'm like, we have to tell them something. If they were in your restaurant right now, being like, I was unhappy, would you be like, I don't see you, I don't see you? I'm like, no, you wouldn't do that if they were standing here. We can't do that on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Like we actually have to just respond to it like grown adults, even though I know you just don't want to deal with it because you're tired, you had a long day. Maybe the person is crazy, but like we still have to step in and actually respond because that's just the nature of interacting with other people. I think there's some simple actions you can take that I give to a lot of the business owners that I work with, especially when it comes to reviews and comments on social media. I'm like, you really have to respond to it. Like the most effort a customer makes now is this. That's like the most effort they made. They could have just hearted you. They could have just cried. They could have just scrolled by, but they stopped and they typed sentences like with their thumbs. That's like the biggest effort they made all day. So when people comment and review, I'm like, I don't care if you respond with just like whatever, the thank you emoji, but do something to let them know that like they said something to you and you heard them. Right? Because it's so important for you to get that engagement, especially on social media. Conversation is like the most valuable thing you can have. It's the thing that pushes you into the algorithms and gets you more exposure, is actual back and forth commentary, right? And conversation. So when people do that, we want to be like, yes, thank you very much, right? Even if they said something positive, we need to respond to them and let them know that they're basically heard. Also, if you're using insights and analytics, I feel like those are right now the key ways that like we are listening with the data. We are listening to how people use our websites and how long they stay on different things, what they pay attention to more, which blogs they read more frequently, which ads they interact with, which posts got the most attention, right? So we're doing all of that, and it's really not just because we want to look at tracking, it's because we're trying to listen to the customers. We're trying to pay attention to them. We're trying to deduce the psychographic why. underneath of things by paying attention to those details. And then I'm a huge fan, because I work in SEO and social media, of doing hashtag and keyword research. So again, moz.com is a great website for studying what people type into Google. There's actually a ton of tools out there. My favorite one is called Answer the Public. And it's a great sort of conversational tool where you can just get all sorts of questions and topics that people are typing in. Google Ads has a great tool called the Google Keyword Planner. But all of these tools are centered around understanding what people say and type into search engines. So that when we're creating content, we're not just guessing what people looked for. We know what they looked for, right? And this just like allows us to have better content that like sort of relates to people. So again, if you're working in any type of industry where there's lots of lingo, right? There's lots of professional acronyms and things like that. If you start creating content for the public that's got all these sort of, buzzwords in it, a lot of times you only end up attracting other people in your industry. Sometimes you end up attracting your own competitors through your Google stuff, instead of creating content on your website that is spoken in a way that your customers understand. Right? So one of the first clients I ever had, they planned field trips for like elementary and high school age kids. When I met with them, they were like, our top Google keyword is educational travel consultants. I was like, okay. And then I did a bunch of research for them, and I sat them all down, and I was like, look, the only people who type in educational travel consultants are educational travel consultants. Nobody types it in. If I'm a teacher trying to take my 10th grade class to New York City, do you know what I type in? Field trip, NYC. That's what I type in, right? I'm not looking for these buzzwords in the market. I'm looking for like literally what I need as a teacher and how I would say it. And so this type of kind of market research that I do for almost every project, it really allows us to figure out how are we going to join conversations that are already happening? How can we look at the way that people talk about our products and services and understand the audience better, so that when we're putting out different graphics, different videos, different topics, we can come up with something that they're going to be like, oh, I need that. Oh, I have that question. Oh, I have that problem. Oh, I really enjoy that thing. Like, we want them to almost immediately identify it. So if we can understand the literal verbiage, it's really, really helpful. And I'm always amazed at how every student and client, we find something new in here that we didn't think of. We find some way of saying it, some way of talking about it that is not typical for how we would do it in the office. And so it allows us to just sort of open up our content to potentially getting seen by more people again. And so like I said, basically marketing is a conversation. So we have to be listening and observing while we're doing things, while we're creating messages, while we're campaigning. As we do all those things, we also have to be actually going ahead and paying attention to what the responses are. Because especially when we're doing email, we're doing website stuff, we're doing social media stuff, the response is immediate. We can see it as it happens, right? Even in our social media advertising, we can see that. And that's what allows us to basically be in this constant state of learning, right? So I'm constantly doing things, and I'm listening and observing, and I'm learning about what's working and what everybody's really connecting to, and then I'm adapting my strategy while I execute the strategy, right? And so that is really an important piece of being able to do things in a way that, like I said, eventually get results. Without, I think, again, in the past, there's been this habit of we need to make everything about the campaign perfect, and then we can execute. Or like when I build websites, people are like, well, we have to make everything on the website perfect, and then we go live. And I'm like, you guys are killing me, because it just took us 9 months to get a stupid website live. Are you kidding? It can't take that long. We lost a lot of people taking that long. So we don't have to be perfect. We have to be strategic, right? We have to be strategic, and we have to be ready to adapt. But we don't have to be perfect. And so that's going to allow us a lot more freedom in our particular industry of marketing communications. We're going to be doing a lot more fun, cool stuff and getting results for people if we can cultivate that more than this idea that everything is supposed to be perfect and right before it goes out. So listening is not understanding the words of the question asked. Listening is understanding why the question was asked in the first place. And so I really just, if you haven't ever checked out Simon as well, he does a lot of great things around just how to connect in with people and how to get brands to connect with human beings in a human way that creates a big response. But I think it's really about, again, going to that deeper level of like listening isn't just hearing what you said. Listening is sort of hearing what you said and trying to deduce what the purpose of it is. So all that being said, you can work together, partner up with people, don't be in that silo. Collaboration is going to make a huge difference, and I think this means collaborating with other people that are your colleagues, your fellow students, other people that you respect in the field. As you're working in the field, you want to like look at those people and pay attention to what they're doing. You can also, to get more sort of bigger results, think about how you partner up with other organizations, with other influencers, with other businesses. So as I told you, I went into business with a competitor. I've done better than I ever did before. So I defy this idea that we all have to act like we have to protect what's ours. And we don't want to tell anybody our ideas because they're going to steal them. I'm not saying there's not people out there who don't steal ideas, but what I'm saying is we're all smart enough to build circles of trust with real people that we can trust. And so do that. Don't wait until you're stuck in a spot where you don't have somebody to connect with. Build that circle of trust. And that circle of trust is both internal and external. So some of the best marketing I've seen in the last few years came from companies that partnered up together, came from businesses that made really authentic relationships with influencers and got a huge impact by having shared values and telling a great story and getting people really, really excited. Influencer marketing, I think, is going to continue forward, and we're even seeing a big opening into what we call micro-influencers, right? Which is people who have less than 50,000 fans. And what we're starting to understand is that you can have 50,000, 30,000, or 80,000 fans and be on the lower end of influencer marketing. But sometimes when you have those smaller groups, you actually have higher engagement in the audience than people who have 250,000, 2 million, right? When you look at their numbers, it's like, wow, they have a lot of followers, but their engagement rate is like 4%. And then I've got somebody with 50,000 followers, and their engagement rate is like 20. Right? And so that engagement matters more. It really does, because what they're saying is being heard by people, and people are doing something with it. And so I would rather that smaller group of people actually took actions than that larger group of people, your content just fell on deaf ears and didn't really get the engagement. Like I said, there's a few other things you can do in influencer marketing that I think is really helpful that are kind of part of the trend. I think a lot of it's about reciprocity, and I think a lot of it's about authenticity. So yes, you can pay somebody to say you're great. If you're going to do that, though, you should be transparent, right? And we're requiring that now on the internet. If you just bought somebody off to say you're awesome, I mean, hey, we all have the right to do that, but they should have to say that they got bought off to say it. Versus people who actually just come across your brand or products and just love them. That's a different thing. And so we're seeing that really evolve forward, but I still think influencer marketing is going to have an important place in overall digital marketing. And influencer marketing, to me, is falling under this other umbrella that we call partnership marketing. Sometimes they call it relationship marketing. Or actually, I would say it's probably more like tiers, where relationship marketing is at the top, partnerships is under that umbrella, influencers is under that umbrella. But there's lots of ways that you can partner, not just with influencers. So for-profits and nonprofits can work together. There's all different ways that you can engage in conversations on social media. You can share each other's content in email newsletters. You can link to each other's websites. You can even run ad campaigns together and do really, really well. Some of the best ad campaigns my business partner did last year was actually taking a budget, splitting it between two companies, and them exchanging content. So this company basically paid to boost the other company's content to their network, and then vice versa on the other side. And what happened was they got way better responses, because instead of the company saying, hey, buy my thing, I'm awesome, the company was like, hey, buy these guys' thing, they're awesome. And then the other one was like, hey, buy that thing over there, it's awesome. And they both got more sales out of that sort of crossover, right? Which I thought was really, really interesting. It generated a lot of great connections. And then one of the things that you can do on your own, and this is more of like a take home for you all, again, because I feel like it's something I'm starting to work on more just with other marketing professionals in the field. But I think emotional intelligence is really important for being in marketing communications. You're gonna have to deal with a lot of people. You're gonna spend all day caring about what other people say. Like literally it becomes your job. I often tell people, for me as a marketer, if my clients and students don't succeed, I get nothing out of the relationship, even if they paid me, right? So we can run a project, you can give me money, I can put it in the bank and keep it, but if you don't succeed, it was really useless to me because it can't go in my portfolio. It doesn't end up on my roster of awesome things that I made happen. And so this is an extremely relationship-based industry where a lot of times you are going to spend a lot of time navigating different types of personalities, both internally and externally. You're going to have to push through on days when maybe you don't feel like doing certain things, and you're going to have to do it anyway because you're on a schedule, and the schedule has to stay in place for things to be consistent. You're going to be in situations where you might have to manage an angry customer or manage somebody else, or even a couple other people in the company that disagree on how things are going to be presented. So a lot of times I work with business owners where there's two of them and they don't agree on which audience is the priority. They don't agree on which ad they like better. They don't agree on those things. And so I have to be that person that kind of becomes that peacemaker person. I'm like, hey, we have systems for this. We can work this out. So I would say before you ever get a marketing job, one of the #1 things I tell people to do is spend some time on this. Get right with yourself. Feel like really good about your ability to handle your own emotions, and then start working on getting really clear about handling other people's. Because communication is communication, and oftentimes you're just gonna have unpredictable things that you can't explain or predict. And so I've just put some interesting information in here about what this is. This is my favorite book if you ever want to read one sort of about this. It's not titled anything about emotional intelligence, but it's by Daniel Goleman, who's sort of the leader of that field, and the Dalai Lama, who's obviously amazing. But this is one of the greatest books I ever read, and didn't just make me better as a person, but it made me way better at my job to understand how to kind of manage things. And of course, Steve Jobs says great things in business are never done by one person, they're done by a team of people. So even when you're in a smaller company and you're a one-person show, you're usually not in a silo alone when you're succeeding. There's usually other people around you that are kind of boosting you up and helping you. And so for any of you that are thinking about going out there and getting a job, these are just the things that I think are going to make you more marketable. A lot of them are just an overview of what we just discussed. And when you go into the workforce, I think it's really important to, any projects you've worked on, any type of internships that you've done, capitalize on that. Because being able to walk through the door of a job interview and say, I feel comfortable, and here's the kind of things that I feel comfortable doing, and here's what they looked like when I did them, that usually stands out quite a bit. And I think it also shows, because in marketing, especially in the digital world, even if you're coming right out of college or you're new to it, when you step into your job, you end up having to take somewhat of a leadership role, because they're going to expect you to drive ideas. They're going to expect you to create the systems where you can listen and understand and track. And so I think it's really important, if you can cultivate those, then you'll stand out from the whole crowd, and you'll really be able to explain to them how you're going to make their business stronger. So thank you guys so much.